Hello, friends. Welcome to our campfire, where we tell stories, enjoy our company of each other, and maybe make some new friends, and connect with old. Today, on Christmas, we bring you a tale that blends the wild, untamed beauty of Alaska with the warmth and the wonder of the holiday season. Now, this is a story of fear and discovery and community. It's a tale of a legend that walked out of the snowy wilderness and into the hearts of a community. This is the Old Man of the Mountain. It's a Bigfoot Christmas story. Denali stands like a titan hewn from the bone of the earth itself, its vast shoulders mantled in snow and crowned with a halo of shifting clouds. The mountain is more than a peak. It has a presence, eternal and unyielding, looming over the Alaskan wilderness with an authority that silences even the boldest of men. And in its shadow, life clings tenaciously, a raw struggle against the elements that mirrors the untamed spirit of the land. The legend of the Old Man of the Mountain was as old as the northern winds. Whispers of his existence flowed like the rivers fed by Denali's glacial heart. Some even claimed that he was born of the mountain itself, a creature wrought from ice and stone, bound to its slopes as a keeper of its secrets. Others, they believed it was a man, a prospector who had succumbed to the wilds, shedding the trappings of civilization, to become something other, something primal. The stories told of great footprints in the snow, wider and deeper than any beast, and of eyes that glowed like embers in the long Alaskan nights. Hunters would swear that they heard his call. It was a sound both mournful and commanding, echoing through the valleys as though the mountain itself were speaking. Yet none who sought him returned with proof, only tales etched into their faces in lines of fear and wonder. To those who lived beneath the shadow of the great mountain, his legend persisted, carried on the wind that swept through the spruce and over the ice, as eternal as Denali's towering peaks. For generations now, the story of the old man has been confined to the remote slopes of Denali. But now, as Anchorage grew into a bustling city and more of the forest was being torn down for new homes, the legend of the Old Man of the Mountain seemed to be lost to the past. That is, until a few years ago, when unsettling rumors spread like wildfire through Anchorage. The Old Man of the Mountain had come down from his icy throne and was wandering the streets of the city, terrorizing entire neighborhoods and instilling fear in the hearts of everyone. It began on a cold December night, when Carol Peterson, she was a nurse finishing her late shift, saw a hulking figure outside the clinic. The streetlights flickered as the creature moved into view. Its silhouette was enormous, its shoulders impossibly broad, and its head crowned with what appeared to be a wild mane of hair. Carol's keys slipped from her trembling hand as the figure turned, and as she reached down to get her keys, never taking her eyes off of that massive figure, he turned and he ran off into the night, leaving enormous footprints in the snow. Earlier that same night, George Hanley, a night shift janitor at the Anchorage Public Library, had been hauling trash to the dumpsters behind the building when he caught sight of something large moving among the trees. At first, he thought it was a moose, common enough in these parts, but as it stepped into the dim glow of a street lamp, George saw that it wasn't a moose at all. The creature's frame was massive, upright, and draped in what appeared to be thick, matted fur. George noted that it didn't move like a bear, but it walked upright like a man would. He watched as the creature paused, turning its head as though listening, before loping off into the shadows. George's trash bags hit the ground as he bolted back inside, slamming the door behind him. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of town, a family driving home from a late holiday gathering encountered something equally unsettling. As their SUV rounded a bend, The headlights illuminated a figure crossing the road. It moved quickly, but not before they caught a glimpse of its towering height and long arms, swinging in a peculiar, almost mechanical rhythm. The children in the back seat screamed, and their father, gripping the wheel with white-knuckled hands, pressed the accelerator, leaving the figure behind. Later, when they had finally gotten the kids calmed down enough to sleep and begin talking about what they'd seen, the mother swore she saw glowing eyes reflected in the rearview mirror. As the night wore on, the sightings continued. A security guard at a shipping yard reported hearing heavy footfalls and low grunts near the loading dock. A jogger out for an ill-advised midnight run claimed to have been followed by a shadowy figure that disappeared when he reached a well-lit street. Now, even the dogs at the local animal shelter, they were usually quiet during the night, well, they barked and they howled uncontrollably, their agitation spreading like wildfire through the kennels. And by dawn, Anchorage was abuzz with fear and speculation. Reports flooded in from every corner of the city, each tale more bizarre than the last, yet no one could say for certain what they'd seen. The only common thread was the sheer size of the creature and the sense of unease it left in its wake. The morning newscast ran a story of the strange sightings, and the local newspaper ran the headline, "Bigfoot spotted in Anchorage." The townsfolk whispered in fear, locking their doors and peering out of frosted windows. Some claimed to have seen the creature prowling near a dumpster or lurking in the shadows of a parking lot. Others swore that they heard heavy footfalls on their rooftops at night or found enormous footprints in their yards. Sheriff Mike Hargrove, a practical man who didn't believe in anything supernatural, stood before a restless crowd down at the town hall. "We're dealing with a bear or a prankster," he said firmly. "There's no such thing as Bigfoot." While determined to put an end to the hysteria, the sheriff organized a search. Armed with rifles and flashlights, deputies combed the darkened streets and alleys, their breaths steaming in the frigid airs. Hours passed without incident, until they reached the abandoned rail yard on the outskirts of town. There, beneath the pale glow of a single street lamp, they found him. The figure stood near a rusted train car. His back was to him. He was immense, draped in what appeared to be layers of fur and tattered fabric. Now, when the sheriff called out, the figure turned slowly. The search party held their breath as they took in his face. It was human, yet weathered and wild, his eyes dark and piercing beneath the tangle of matted hair. His beard flowed like a river of frost, and his skin was the color of old bark. "Hold there! Don't move! Who are you?" the sheriff demanded, his rifle aimed but unsteady. The man, if he could be called that, tilted his head as though considering a question, and in the flash of an instant he was gone, darting around the back of the rail car and disappearing into the forest beyond. Now, by morning, the streets of Anchorage were blanketed in fresh snow, yet giant footprints remained where the beast had created crevices in the frozen ground. Townsfolk were overcome with fear. Streets emptied after sundown as residents locked their doors and pulled their curtains tight. Stores reported selling out of locks, flashlights, guns, and ammo as people prepared for the unexpected. Schools canceled evening activities, and parents warned their children to stay indoors. The usually bustling downtown streets became eerily quiet, save for the occasional crunch of snow underfoot as a patrol officer passed by. Now, despite the growing unease, some residents sought to profit from the hysteria. Shops began selling Bigfoot Alaska t-shirts and mugs and ornaments depicting a cartoonish version of the legendary creature. Slogans like "Denali Shadow" and "I Survived Bigfoot" adorned merchandise, drawing both locals looking for a bit of levity and tourists eager for a unique souvenir. A bar downtown even crafted a special drink called the Yeti's Breath, a frosty cocktail served in a glass rimmed with powdered sugar to resemble snow. But the humor couldn't mask the underlying tension. Each new sighting brought fresh waves of panic. A video surfaced online, purportedly showing the creature, a dark, hulking shape moving swiftly through the snow-covered alley. Though blurry and inconclusive, it went viral, further fueling the frenzy. Now, days later, as the frost deepened and Christmas grew near, a young couple snowshoeing near Denali's base camp came across something strange. Among the snow-covered pines stood a crude monument, stones stacked in a deliberate pattern, about 6 foot tall, adorned with tufts of fur and small weathered carvings. There were trinkets also, like there was a hood ornament from an old Diamond Rio truck and a pair of rusted binoculars, a pocket knife, several glass balls. Why, it almost looks like a Christmas tree, they thought as they studied the strange monument. They took pictures with their phones and loaded them to their social media pages, and within hours, a score of people were hiking up the trail in snowshoes, wanting to see the spectacle for themselves. Unfortunately, not everyone who witnessed the strange sight was content with merely taking a photograph, so by the end of the day, few of the trinkets actually remained. Now, the next morning, Anchorage woke to chaos. The town's massive Christmas tree, a 31-foot white spruce from the Chugach National Forest that had stood proudly in the town square park, was gone. All the decorations, all the lights, and even the tree itself just simply disappeared. Now, for a moment, Bigfoot was forgotten as the TV crews and newspaper reporters swarmed to Town Square Park, where the giant Christmas tree had once stood. Only a jagged stump remained, encircled with bright yellow crime scene tape. Sheriff Mike Hargrove and several of his deputies were there, taking snapshots, holding people back so they could measure the footprints leading away from the missing tree. Emma Carter, historian and editor of the Anchorage Daily News, What's Happening in Your Neighborhood section, was there with her young son, snapping photographs, jotting down notes. Now, she'd been particularly busy the past several weeks with all the numerous Bigfoot sightings and what was normally an easy, if not boring, position. She had spent her life debunking local legends, from haunted cabins to cursed mines. She did not believe Bigfoot was real and hoped that somehow, through her sharp eye for detail and through research, she could help to expose the pranksters responsible for all this mayhem. Now that the town Christmas tree was missing, she was even more convinced that it was just a prank. "We're better than tabloid journalists," she told her staff, determined to expose the truth behind the rumors. Her 10-year-old son, Ben, however, was enthralled by the stories. Every night he would pore over the newspaper clippings and online videos, convinced that the old man of the mountain was real. "You'll see, Mom," he said later that evening as they were decorating their own Christmas tree. "He's out there." Emma laughed, ruffling his hair. "Ben, it's just a bear or someone in a costume. People have overactive imaginations and they love a good story, especially around the holidays." But Ben, he wasn't convinced. Determined to prove her wrong, Ben had hatched a plan. Now that night, after his mother had gone to bed, Ben packed a small backpack with snacks, a flashlight, and his dad's old compass. And bundled in his warmest winter coat, he slipped out of that house and he headed into the woods, following the tracks he was certain would lead to Bigfoot's hiding place. When Emma discovered Ben's empty bed, panic seized her. She found Ben's footprints leading into the forest, immediately called the sheriff. And very soon a search party of several deputies combed the forest behind the house, their voices echoing through the still, icy air as they called out for Ben. The search stretched into the afternoon in temperatures that barely reached 28 degrees. Tension mounted with every passing hour. Airports, train stations, and bus lines were notified. and an Amber Alert was posted. Emma's heart pounded with fear, and when asked to speak by one of the local news stations, she broke down into tears while asking for the community's assistance in finding her beloved son. Deep in the forest, Ben followed a trail of enormous footprints and broken branches. He wasn't sure how long he'd been walking or how far he'd gone. The footprints were spaced far enough apart that it was difficult for him to jump from one footprint to the next. But the snow was thigh-high in between the crevasses of the massive footprints. Now, it was late afternoon when Ben stumbled upon a clearing where a massive pine tree stood, decorated with trinkets and oddities, much like the monument near Denali's base. Strings of animal bones and shards of metal hung like garlands, and at the tree's base lay the town's missing ornaments, gleaming like stolen treasure. Ben's eyes widened. "I knew it," he whispered, standing in awe underneath the grand Christmas tree. And that was when he suddenly realized how cold it really was, now that the small amount of sun had dipped below the horizon. He just wished that his mom were there to see the spectacle before him. The chill seeped through his coat as the light began to fade, and realizing how far he was from home and how cold it would become, Ben decided it was safer to stay put until daylight. He crouched beneath that massive tree, wrapping his coat and scarf tightly around himself, and tried to stay warm. Exhausted, he quickly fell asleep, oblivious to the silent guardian watching from the shadows. As the forest grew darker, the massive figure stepped forward. The creature's enormous hands carefully lifted the boy, cradling him as if he were made of glass. With deliberate, gentle steps, the guardian carried Ben through the forest, following the path that the boy had taken. When the search party finally found them, Ben was asleep, nestled in the crook of the creature's arm. Sheriff Hargrove raised his gun. "Put down the boy," he yelled, and held his gun steady as the giant creature placed him gently on the snow, its dark eyes keeping a close watch on the sheriff. "Now stand back," the sheriff said as one of the deputies moved towards the boy. Ben was wakened by all the movement and the sudden cold of being placed down on the snow, looked up at the officers. "Don't shoot," he yelled. Still, everyone's gun was trained on the Bigfoot. "I found the tree. He only wanted to have a Christmas tree," Ben yelled. "Please don't shoot." The officers slowly lowered their guns, and the Bigfoot turned and disappeared into the forest. Ben ran to the sheriff's waiting arms. "He's real." "Well, let's get you home," Sheriff Hargrove replied. The Anchorage Daily News ran this story on the front page with the headline, "The Christmas Spirit Touches Everyone, Even Bigfoot." It was accompanied by a grainy photo of Ben wrapped in a blanket, his face a mix of wonder and exhaustion, and the clearing where the forest tree stood decorated with trinkets. The story captured the hearts of everyone in town, turning fear into curiosity and mystery into tradition. In the days that followed, the town buzzed with a new kind of excitement. What had once been a tale of terror transformed into a symbol of unity and holiday cheer. Families, armed with boxes of ornaments, garlands, and lights, ventured into the woods to decorate the massive tree. It wasn't about claiming the legend or proving it false anymore. It was about giving something back to the forest, to the mountain, and to the old man himself. Now, by Christmas Eve, the tree sparkled like something out of a dream. Strings of lights powered by portable generators wove through the branches, and ornaments of every shape and size gleamed under the starlight. Someone had even placed a handcrafted star at the very top, its golden edges catching the moonlight. Around the tree, townsfolk gathered, their breath rising in clouds as they sang carols and shared stories. That was the first time in years that laughter had echoed so freely in those woods. And Ben, standing next to his mother, held a small carved ornament he had made himself, It was a simple depiction of a pine tree, etched with the words, "For Bigfoot." He placed it carefully on a low branch and stepped back, his heart swelling with pride. The years that followed turned the event into an annual tradition. Every December, the townsfolk would gather in the forest, carrying decorations and supplies. Children giggled as they hung their handmade ornaments, while adults sipped hot cocoa and exchanged stories of the sightings that had once frightened them. The tree, now known as Bigfoot's Christmas tree, had become a symbol of hope and community. Now, some years, visitors from other towns and even distant cities joined the gathering, drawn by the legend and the warmth of the story. The event grew, yet it never lost its heartfelt simplicity. People came not for spectacle, but for the chance to connect with each other, with the land, and with the mysteries that made Alaska so very unique. Now, as for Bigfoot, sightings never ceased entirely. Every so often a hunter or a hiker would report a fleeting glimpse of a massive figure in the trees or find footprints too large to be human. And every Christmas morning, without fail, new trinkets and baubles appeared on the decorated tree, small tokens of gratitude left by unseen hands. In the clearing, the tree shines brightly, a beacon of light in the winter darkness, reminding everyone that some mysteries are best left unsolved, and some traditions born of wonder are the most precious of all. Well, this holiday season, Ginger and I would like to thank y'all for being a part of the Hidden Corners and sharing many campfires with us. Your support and curiosity, your enthusiasm means more to us than words can express. And on this special day, we find ourselves reflecting on the incredible journey we've shared with all of you this year. And for those of you that have been with us from the very beginning, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for tuning in and keeping the spirit of wonder alive. From our family to yours, may your Christmas be filled with warmth, laughter, and the kind of magic that only this season can bring. Merry Christmas.